Can you tell me about the day that the police came to your door and started talking to you? Is that something you're able to talk about?
Recorded. Well, they introduced themselves as homicide detectives, so I knew that if they were there, it was because somebody was dead. And at that point, to be honest with you, I really believed in the system. So I figured if I told them the truth, that everything would be okay.
The American criminal justice system enforces our laws and keeps watch over us.
Is that person in the courtroom now?
But who is watching the system? I'm Joe Berlinger, and I've used my camera for 20 years to knock down doors and pursue the truth.
Our faith in the system.
Now we're going inside the American criminal justice system.
Any comments on the charges?
From law enforcement to elected officials, the court system to corrections, to find out if justice is being served. Most homicide investigators will tell you that in the age of forensic science, a good old-fashioned confession is the gold standard of evidence. I've seen it myself. Nothing sways a jury more than a defendant who seems to admit to murder, whether they did it or not. You know, it's so hard to wrap your head around the idea of false confessions. You know, why would somebody admit to a crime that they didn't commit? But it happens more often than you would like to think. In 27% of the cases that are overturned by DNA evidence, the defendant gave a false statement, and they paid for it. In this episode, we'll be looking at two cases where convictions were reached almost exclusively on the basis of the suspect's confession. Kirsten Blaze Lobato was convicted of homicide in Las Vegas. She claims she's innocent, and she says her words were used against her.
Kirsten Lobato, seen here in court, is charged with murder and sexual penetration of a dead human body, the body of Las Vegan Duran Bailey.
Kirsten Lobato confessed to this murder. She admitted to unique circumstances and facts that link her to this murder.
The bottom line is, someone has been in jail for over 12 years for a crime they didn't commit.
J.B. Afo-Manine is Kirsten Lobato's New York-based defense attorney. How's it going?
Hey, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
How you doing?
Hey.
I'm J.B. also. Joe Berlinger.
Exactly.
So.
Pleasure to meet you, Joe.
How's it going?
Very good.
I'm really interested in talking to you about this case. It's fascinated me for a while. I've done a lot of cases that involve false confessions, but this one has a really kind of special twist to it.
It's crucial to point out in this case that there was not even a false confession. There was not a confession at all. Kirsten Blaze Lobato did not confess to this crime.
Instead, Lobato claims she was raped in a parking lot in Las Vegas and defended herself by stabbing her attacker. She told a counselor about the incident. When a homeless man named Duran Bailey was found dead and mutilated in a dumpster on the other side of town, the counselor called Las Vegas homicide.
When the detectives came to her house, she thought that they were questioning her about her being a victim of a rape, attempted rape, a violent crime, not a suspect in a murder case. She was led to believe by their silence they were talking about the same case. That is one of the biggest travesties we're dealing with here. This is it. Okay. Hello?
Hello, you have a prepaid call from Kirsten Lobato. Hello?
Hey, Kirsten, how you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Excellent, excellent.
I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know you haven't really done this before.
Well, I am scared. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I'm shaking right now.
At the end of the day, what do you want people to know about your case, about your situation?
That's a tough one. I just want them to know that I didn't do it. I didn't know that there was any inconsistencies between what I was telling them and what had happened in their case. I figured if I told them the truth, that everything would be okay.
Homicide investigators are convinced Lobato is lying, that she conjured up an attempted rape story by a different person to cover up the murder of Duran Bailey. When did you realize things were not okay?
I think my arraignment probably was the first time that I was like, oh, something is definitely not right here. I had no idea that they were painting things the way that they were, that it was two separate incidents that they were talking about. And once all the pieces started coming together in my mind, I panicked.
She believed in the criminal justice system, and the criminal justice system let her down.
Steve Moore, and I'm headed into the office today. I'm working on Kirsten Lobato's case. I was in the FBI for about 25 years and promised myself I would not work murder cases again where I had to go see autopsies. That was one of those great retirement plans that didn't work out. The problem with convicting on a case that's solely dependent on a confession, confessions are useless without corroboration.
Steve Moore's investigation raises questions about whose version of events is more credible. When he breaks down the case, he starts with the timeline.
You have the summer of 2001, all right? May here, you got June, and you got July. At the end of May, you have Kirsten Lobato. She's in a parking lot of a hotel on the east side of Las Vegas. She is attacked. He tried to rape her. She took out a butterfly knife and was able to slash at him and told half a dozen friends in this time frame. She told them in this time frame that this incident occurred and that she had slashed the man's penis. Now you have the murder in July of 2001 of Duran Bailey behind a bank in West Las Vegas. So we're talking a month, maybe 6 weeks difference. So it's conceivable that the police confused the attack of late May, where she defended herself, with the murder on July 8th and charged Kirsten with murder.
Our next case is a textbook example of how police officers can use extreme tactics to coerce a confession out of a suspect in a murder case, and how prosecutors can develop tunnel vision, ignore the facts, and fight tooth and nail against reopening a case. Usually a false confession involves a completely made-up story in which people are just looking to get out of a very threatening situation, so they'll say anything thinking they can fix it later. But there's no fixing it later. They're stuck with these statements, and these statements are used against them in a court of law. In the fall of 1989, the town of Peekskill, New York was stunned by the brutal murder and rape of a 15-year-old girl named Angela Correa. The investigation, confession, and eventual conviction of a 16-year-old student named Jeffrey Deskovic has shaken up the justice system here all these years later. Hey.
How are you?
Joe Berlinger.
Oh, well.
Thanks for helping me. So yeah, I wanted to look at some of those articles from '89 about the Deskovic case.
Sure, we have all the Evening Star right here. This should be a front page story. And there it is. We have Peekskill. Police investigate death of teen from Peekskill's a homicide.
Okay, great. Thanks. So you mind if I hang out here?
Look, yeah.
Okay, great. Jeffrey Deskovic and one of his lawyers watch as the jury inspects the site where Angela Correa's body was found in November of 1989. Look how young he looks. I just can't imagine being in that situation, going to the murder site, surrounded by the jury, press. Crazy situation. Most of the journalists who covered the Deskovic case have moved on, but I tracked down one writer who stuck with the story. Jonathan Bandler is an investigative reporter for the Journal News. Walk me through the case.
November 15th, 1989, Angela Correa, she was a 15-year-old Peekskill High School student. She left her house on Main Street. She was headed for some woods behind Hillcrest Elementary School near Griffin Pond. She was carrying her camera. She was going to take some pictures. She was in a photography class. She got up there. She was in the woods. At some point between 3:30 and 4:30, she was brutally attacked.
Correa's body was nude from the waist down. The medical examiner determined she died from a blow to the head and manual strangulation. She was sexually assaulted. Blood, semen, and a hair sample were collected for DNA testing and sent to the FBI crime lab. With no leads, the police created a psychological profile of the killer, asserting that he was young, knew the victim and most likely was a loner. Peekskill, New York. In 1989, this quiet town in upstate New York was on edge. A 15-year-old high school student named Angela Correa was raped and murdered. Local investigators were narrowing their search to one, and only one, suspect.
One thing that was interesting was Jeffrey Deskovic was a 16-year-old student there. He had been a classmate. He wasn't a close friend, but he was certainly somebody who knew her. He showed up at each of the memorial services. He was clearly distraught, and he also started talking to the police, offering his own theories about what had happened. He kind of fit that profile. So they started talking to him.
Deskovic's answers only raised suspicion. Police assert that he admitted to knowing what Correa wore on the day of the murder, that he was familiar with the crime scene, and that he knew she was strangled and hit in the head. So police asked him for a blood sample, then a polygraph.
You had a psychologically vulnerable teenager. You had aggressive investigators. It was a perfect storm that engulfed Jeffrey Deskovic.
Hey there.
Hello, how you doing?
Joe Berlinger.
Jeff Deskovic. Nice
Really
to meet
nice
you.
to meet you.
Leslie Robinson is
Hi,
my
how are
partner.
you doing? So what do you got going on here?
Well, we have our re-entry game called Beyond the Bars Recharge Re-entry, and it's a tool designed to facilitate formerly incarcerated people re-entry, getting back into society and reconnecting with their family.
Give me some examples
Okay.
of some incarceration questions.
Okay. Did you pray while you were incarcerated? If yes, what did you pray for?
How would you answer that? Did you pray while you were incarcerated?
I prayed early and often, to borrow from sports terminology, boxing. But I prayed that my innocence could be established and I would be released. And it took 16 years, but it was granted.
During his 16 years in prison, Jeffrey Deskovic would often replay the details of his confession, especially the lie detector test.
So the next day, rather than go to school, I went to the police station expecting that the test would be at Peekskill headquarters. And instead, they took me to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County, New York, where the polygraphist himself was actually a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator who was pretending to be a civilian. So he never told me he was a police officer. The polygraphist had this technique that he was used to carrying out, which he had an acronym for, GTC, Get the Confession. The polygraphist puts me in a small room and attaches a polygraph machine to me. He gives me countless cups of coffee, and the reason why that's important is because the premise of the polygraph is that when you tell a lie, you'll become nervous, and the nervousness will result in an increased pulse rate. The polygraphist used a lot of third-degree tactics. I mean, he raised his voice at me, invaded my personal space. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again, getting more and more ferocious as each hour happened. He kept us up for more than 7 hours. Towards the end of the interrogation, he made a statement to me saying that, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. I just want you to verbally confirm this." When he said that really shot my fear through the roof. Being young, naive, frightened, 16, I wasn't thinking about the long-term implications. I was just concerned with my own safety in the moment. And I took the out which he offered, and I made up a story based upon information which they had given me in the course of their interrogation.
This interrogation was never recorded. Instead, investigators would rely on the polygraph examiner's recollections. He wrote that Deskovic's last words were, "I sometimes think I did it because I know too much about the things where she was killed."
I would say that I was a complete mental and emotional wreck at that point, and hence the police officer's testimony that I was on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably.
Deskovic was arrested and charged with murder. Prosecutors rushed the case to the grand jury. 3 days after he was indicted, the DNA report came back. Deskovic's DNA did not match the evidence. Prosecutors went ahead with the case anyway. In January 1991, Deskovic was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 15 years to life. His false confession sent him to prison, despite no DNA evidence linking him to the crime. What's it like to go through that kind of a nightmare?
Yeah, it is just that. It's a nightmarish alternative reality featuring the guards, the prisoners, the staff, all as obstacles to the ultimate goal, which is to prove your innocence and therefore regain your freedom.
In Las Vegas, Kirsten Lobato is living her nightmare. 12 years into a 20-year sentence, Lobato is still claiming her innocence, but she's watching her chances of exoneration slip away.
Well, you know, some days are better than others, that's for sure. I mean, it is a challenge. It's embarrassing for me at this point to admit I have become somewhat institutionalized. Like, I have adjusted to this environment, and I'm scared of what the future holds for me.
Yeah. How's your family holding up through all this?
They're much, much better now than they were. Initially, they were a wreck, and I'm even now just finding out things that went on. I had no idea.
I'm not going to put too much water on the tomatoes. Dad says that it'll get another
I think you've been
yield.
watering them too much. The tomatoes don't look that good.
The best way for me to explain it is I feel kind of frozen in time. It's a very strange thought that life has frozen until she comes. That's what it seems like. We don't do a whole heck of a lot. We don't do holidays.
For us, the holidays are food. That's it.
We don't decorate
We
anymore.
don't decorate. We don't celebrate. We don't do any of that.
She's gone. She's not here.
You know, Thanksgiving, yeah. Thanks for what? Telling the truth? Yeah, the truth will set you free. Yeah, don't kid yourself.
Yeah, that's the bitterness part, and I know that.
Yeah, it is.
Do you think that's a way that you're kind of...
Frozen in time? Yeah.
Yeah, we're frozen in time
Damn
here.
right.
1000 paper 1467 with the tape statement and rebid number 010708-2410.
I just come home from work, and Blaze was coming out of the shower, and the two detectives were inside the living room waiting for Blaze to get out of the shower. My reaction was I didn't know what the hell was going on at first. And then I watched through the window, and they showed a picture, and she was shaking her head. I could see what was going on. And then they turned on, I saw the tape turn on.
And you were explaining to us what happened a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas? Okay, and what happened, do you recall?
I got out of my car, and he came out of nowhere and grabbed me from behind.
And what did the person look like?
He was a black man, older.
Did he ever hit you?
Yes, he slapped me in my face when I was crying and told me to shut up because I was bit.
Where did you end up cutting him?
I cut his penis. I remember that.
Okay. And do you remember how you cut it?
No. I'm gonna throw up.
I heard Melissa's heart, please.
No, you don't. You don't know how hard it is to know that you've hurt somebody and you don't even remember it.
We're just trying to find out what you remember.
This would be the only interview Kirsten Lobato would have with Las Vegas detectives, and her next statement would, in many ways, seal her fate.
I figured nobody would care if I just drove off. I didn't think anybody would lose somebody like that.
And then all of a sudden she stood up, and they put handcuffs on her. That's when I lost it. Right then, I was like, what the f***'s going on? Excuse my language. And when she came out, that's when she said she was attacked by a man. He tried to rape her, and apparently he died. And I was like, well, self-defense.
Las Vegas is a tough city. The city has a certain lure. There's a criminal element on the streets of Las Vegas, especially in the tougher neighborhoods. This is downright frightening. A lot of sex-related crimes, a lot of drugs. It's a very interesting place to be a crime reporter.
Glenn Pewitt covered the Kirsten Lobato case for the Las Vegas Review.
The active theory, according to prosecutors and police, was that Miss Lobato had had an interaction with Mr. Bailey that was sexual in nature. He had lured her into a sexual encounter for the purposes of drugs and for giving her some methamphetamine. And then he didn't have any meth, and that this induced kind of a meth psychosis that caused her to completely snap and become extremely violent and engage in what is commonly referred to as overkill.
The prosecution had a strong point of view regarding the circumstances and the motive for the crime, but the case is riddled with inconsistencies.
You start simply with the basics of the case. You have this crime scene. This is a cinder block area behind a bank. They find a body of a man. And he had been brutally murdered. Right about here, they found 6 of his teeth. Right here, they found a pool of blood where his carotid artery had been cut. Underneath him here, they found a pool of blood because somebody had stuck a knife in his rectum. They had also taken his penis. That was found here. He would have bled to death from the carotid. He had broken ribs. His teeth were knocked out. He was basically beaten, bludgeoned, and mutilated to death. So here's where my mind starts to get blown. There's no hair, DNA, prints from Kirsten found at this crime scene. There's no skin cells. Can you imagine? He lost 6 teeth, and they're saying that she didn't even lose a hair off her head? The forensics tell you the complete lack of any evidence of her ever being here. To me, now you've got a huge problem.
What investigators did have was a confession by Kirsten Lobato along with circumstantial evidence linking her to the crime. Prosecutors reviewed the case and decided to offer Lobato a 3-year plea deal, which she rejected.
Frankly, it was stunning to people. You know, she was in a lot of trouble. You know, it was a big risk for her. I mean, a huge risk, because in Nevada, a first-degree murder conviction is an automatic life sentence.
Where were you on July 8th?
I was in Panaca.
Where were you on July 7th?
In Panaca.
Did you kill Duran Bailey?
No, I did not.
This is one of those cases where you can't help but feel sorry for the defendant. And you also can't help but think that there's a compelling argument for her innocence. There's no physical evidence that links Kirsten Lobato to the scene. I mean, none. But they ran into a buzzsaw in Bill Kephart.
Multiple stab wounds, multiple head wounds, multiple cut wounds, multiple defensive wounds.
Bill Kephart is a very good prosecutor. He was all over her and really questioning everything she said and was trying to make her look like a liar.
Is it self-defense to walk away after cutting a person's penis off and go back and bludgeon them to death? Or is it premeditation?
He was just on top of it and really went after her statements to the police.
Her statement then was, I didn't think anybody would miss somebody like that.
Where were you on July 8th?
I was in Panaca.
Where were you on July 7th?
In Panaca.
Did you kill Duran Bailey?
No, I did not.
There's no physical evidence that links Kirsten Lobato to the scene. I mean, none. Bill Kephart is a very good prosecutor. He was all over her and really questioning everything she said and was trying to make her look like a liar.
Is it self-defense to walk away after cutting a person's penis off and go back and bludgeon them to death? Or is it premeditation?
He was just on top of it and really went after her statements to the police.
Her statement then was, I didn't think anybody would miss somebody like that.
That was where the trial really turned. You know, there was doubt in the air. And when she got on the witness stand, she struggled. That's not to say that, she didn't stick to her story. She did, but she just wasn't a great witness. First, you have a young lady who said she was the victim of an attempted rape and that she used a knife to stab someone in their genitals. Yet there was never any police report filed. No one was ever reported to the hospitals with such a wound. Basically, the only person we have to verify this account is Miss Lobato. You can see that something's not right and something doesn't add up. Imagine if you had done something like this and you wanted to come clean about it, or you couldn't keep it inside anymore, but yet you couldn't admit what you did. So you come up with an ancillary kind of similar scenario, but you're not really admitting to what you did, that it was justifiable. But Miss Lobato has proclaimed her innocence from the very beginning. And so the defense rolled the dice, rejected the plea agreement, and taken their chances and gone to trial, and they lost. Do I entertain the possibility that she didn't do this? Yeah, I do. Is it possible she's innocent? Yes, it is. Is it likely that she's gonna get out of prison? I don't think so.
You have to have strong arms to drive this thing. But I always thought I was Atlas, and then I found out, that I can't carry the whole world. And that kind of was a shock to a guy like me, because I always had control of everything. And when my daughter got arrested, I found out how little control I actually have. In all reality, there was a number of emotions that go through something like this. You feel ashamed, but not ashamed of your child. You feel ashamed of yourself, because, what could I have done different?
I had all this faith in the system and believed that the truth would prevail and everything would just be fixed, and it didn't. And when it didn't, I didn't see things the same anymore. I felt that the whole system had failed us. That's when the gates of hell opened up.
That's when it started to spiral.
Messed up. I mean, it was drugs every day. Every day.
And
alcohol.
Pushing each other away and pushing each other away and fighting. And
the one who seems to pay a lot for it, though,
is Ashley.
And I feel bad about that because she missed out on a lot of things. Because we were stuck in time, or we were stuck on drugs, or we were battling and fighting and doing all the craziness, and she's the one who paid the price for it too.
Yeah.
You kind of feel helpless.
In what way?
Like she's in there and you can't get her out.
What's this done to you and your family?
We're never gonna be the same. It's like I was there, I know she wasn't there. And like nobody would listen to us.
Nice ride. Thank you. So tell me where we're headed.
So I am headed to Manhattanville College. I will be discussing my arrest and conviction, time in prison in front of a bunch of social justice people, college students.
When you give presentations like this, does it stir up emotions?
On one hand, it's cathartic, but that all comes with a price. I relive my experience, emotionally some, and, I'm remembering really intense moments and, traumatic moments in my life.
During his years in prison, Jeffrey Deskovic fought an exhaustive legal battle, often alone, writing dozens of letters and filing petitions. He was essentially begging prosecutors to retest hair and semen samples recovered from the victim in the case, Angela Correa.
He was reading about CODIS and the DNA databases, and he just wanted at some point for that to be put in there because maybe the real killer will be identified. He knew he hadn't done it.
The district attorney during Deskovic's incarceration was Janine Pirro, best known these days as a television judge. Pirro consistently denied Deskovic's request for a DNA database comparison, and no court would order her to change her opinion. Deskovic was starting to lose hope.
My lowest day, I learned that I lost my petition for habeas corpus. I was seeking to have my conviction overturned in federal court. I'm arguing my innocence, I'm arguing the DNA, and the decision comes back that I've lost because the court clerk ruled that my paperwork arrived 4 days late. And I get this news while I'm in the special housing unit. I'm in the box because I defended myself against people who wanted to kill me because in their minds, I was a rapist. My immediate reaction to that, I wanted to commit suicide at that point.
When inmates like Deskovic run out of legal options, often it's up to the local district attorneys to reinvestigate. Without their consent, cases can sit for years. Finally, in January 2006, when Pirro left her job to run as New York's Attorney General, he caught a break.
Once the Innocence Project got involved, they went to the new district attorney, Janet DiFiore, and they asked for the testing. She said, yeah, let's go ahead and test it. That was in the summer of 2006.
Within weeks, DNA analysis matched the semen recovered from the rape kit to a prisoner named Stephen Cunningham. Jonathan Bandler tracked Cunningham down and got him to talk about his encounter with Angela Correa.
How did you end up killing her?
Strangling.
Was it during the sex? Was it after the sex?
Yeah, it was during in like a rage.
What was it? What did she do? When you talk about the cocaine makes you aggressive, but what did she do that put you into that rage?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
Cunningham was serving a life sentence for murdering a school teacher in 1993, 4 years after he raped and murdered Angela Correa. And of course, that murder might have been prevented, right?
Sure. Actually, after that, we came back and we showed the video to Jeff. And Jeff was very upset because Cunningham had said that he didn't realize anybody had gone to prison for that killing.
On September 20th, 2006, after spending half of his life behind bars, 32-year-old Jeffrey Deskovic walked out of prison a free man.
There was a long time that I felt that this day would actually never come. In a way, it still doesn't really feel real. It hasn't fully hit me at this point.
Do you think that the police really believed they were bringing in the right suspect?
This was not a good faith error on the part of the police officers. They knew the coercion that went on, and then when you think about the fact that the DNA did not match me 7 months before trial, the results of that argument that it was a good faith error, the bottom drops out of that. It was intentional.
Westchester County's district attorney, Janet DiFiore, commissioned a report that broke down the systemic failings that led to Deskovic's conviction and offered suggestions for reform.
They pointed out there were clear problems with the prosecution, clear problems with the police. Initially, the first one was tunnel vision. Once the police had this profile, once they had this kid who matched it, who was inserting himself into the investigation, that's all they looked at. They didn't look at anybody else. Once the arrest was made, the prosecution also had the tunnel vision. They were going to go with that confession. They weren't going to let this DNA road bump stop them at all. They definitely took liberties that fueled his conviction.
And Deskovic is making the system pay for its mistakes. He filed lawsuits against the city of Peekskill, Westchester County, and the state of New York. Deskovic settled those cases for $13.7 million. He used some of the money to earn a master's degree in criminal justice. And most importantly, he started a foundation to help the wrongfully convicted. So when you do this stuff, do you get nervous or do you?
I always get nervous.
Yeah.
I always get nervous, and I always feel like, not worthy, and, sometimes even question what I'm doing, actually.
How can you feel not worthy? You went through hell. And you inspire others, so how
You're right, but you're right. Once in a while, I have a brief moment of self-doubt.
Yeah, I guess we all do.
Sure.
I've interviewed a lot of people who have been wrongfully convicted, and the thing that amazes me about people in that situation is the lack of bitterness, the desire to do good things with their life, despite being falsely convicted. And that is the case with Jeffrey Deskovic. The work that Deskovic is doing with his foundation is pretty amazing. He's really trying to turn his life around.
Good evening, everybody. I need some more energy in the room. One more time in unison, and our unity is symbolic of the work we're going to do in the cause of justice, fighting wrongful convictions. In unison, please, everybody along with me. Good evening, everybody.
On page 14, State versus Lovatos.
In Las Vegas, Kirsten Lobato's case has remarkable similarities to Deskovic's. When she was granted a second trial in 2006, her new defense team could not convince the court to conduct DNA tests on critical pieces of evidence that could potentially point to another suspect.
The judge looked at all the evidence in the case and said, no, there's no reasonable possibility that any of the evidence in this case, if it were tested for DNA, could result in an exoneration of Kirsten Lobato. This is not a DNA case, it's a confession case. Kirsten Lobato confessed to this murder.
Lobato was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sexual penetration of a corpse. Her sentence, 13 to 25 years. By 2012, Lobato was running out of legal options. Then, a new district attorney, Steve Wolfson, was appointed. He had little connection to the case. Now Lobato's supporters are pressing him to take action. And they're getting help from one of the country's top experts, Jeffrey Deskovic.
Yeah, Jeff, so I just want to give you an update in terms of what's taking place with the case. Just got a call from the DA's office in Clark County. I'm going out there Monday to actually have a meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Our main goal with that meeting is to, push the agenda on DNA testing.
Listen, if I could suggest to you, in your meeting with them, you could reference my case as being one in which there was a pre-existing DNA exclusion, and yet I was blocked from getting further testing. And yet, once I finally was allowed to get further testing, I was able to conclusively demonstrate my innocence.
She's innocent! It's not okay! Wilson, test the DNA!
This isn't just about Kirsten's innocence. It's about finding the real killers.
They did not find any of Kirsten Blaze Lobato's DNA at the scene, and the DNA that was at the scene has not been tested.
Here's what they didn't test. Poor Duran Bailey was dead in the alley, and they did a rape kit, assault kit on his rectum, and they found stuff. But you know what they didn't do? Is test to see whose it was. I tell you what, it's not gonna be. It's not gonna be semen from Kirsten. There were cigarette butts in the area. Cigarette butts are great places for DNA, not just because your fingers touch them, because your saliva touches them. Aren't testing those? Wouldn't that be interesting to find out if the cigarette butts were similar DNA to what was found inside the victim? It's been 10 years. Technology has advanced. Those traces can now point to who did this, and yet they still refuse to test them. Why?
After years of negotiation, Kirsten Lobato's defense team has finally secured a private meeting with Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson. Former FBI investigator Steve Moore is on hand to present his findings.
One of the things that I think that may take a little pressure off of Wolfson to an extent, with maybe he might listen more, is that he wasn't the head of this ship
Right.
at this time. You're not sitting there implicating him in any way.
Right.
You're saying, hey, this is what you walked into. Look at it.
And that is the truth. He had nothing to do with this. Everything I've heard or experienced with Steve Wolfson shows me to be, at least so far, that he is a reasonable man, and I don't think the concrete is dry in his mind about this case.
I agree with you.
Everyone else?
In New York, Jeffrey Deskovic may be free from a prison cell, but in many ways he remains deeply affected by what the system did to him.
Some of the afflictions that I've had to wrestle with included overcoming panic attacks, anxiety attacks, becoming frightened if I simply saw a police officer on the street.
The speech is a chance to share the stage with recent exonerees, innocent men who served time with Deskovic.
Jeffrey pleads for justice. He pleads for those who are still imprisoned, innocent. Men and women who are losing the prime of their years.
Not only did he buy me the clothes, but he shared with me housing. He has an apartment in Manhattan in which he assisted in housing me for about 6 months.
Deskovic's foundation investigates both DNA and non-DNA cases. They dig up key witnesses and arrange legal assistance for indigent prisoners. And every chance he gets, Deskovic pushes back against a system that took away the prime years of his life.
We need to videotape interrogations, for false confessions have been the cause of wrongful convictions in 25% of the 311 DNA-proven wrongful convictions across the country. We need to roll back the doctrine of prosecutorial immunity. Once an arrest has been made, there's nothing to restrain rogue prosecutors from engaging in misconduct, and therefore they should face criminal charges and have to serve at least as much time.
What do you want people to know about your situation?
The essential points I'd like people to know about my case is that I had never been arrested for anything, that I was not a high school dropout, and that if the police want to talk to you, then even if you're innocent, you should insist on them providing you with a lawyer. If you think that it's safe to talk to the police without benefit of a lawyer, just because you're innocent, then all you need to do is look at me and you'll know that that's not true. It happened to me and it can happen to anybody.
Proud of you, brother.
In Las Vegas, J.B. Afo-Manine and Steve Moore finally get the face-to-face meeting with the DA's office.
We're setting up the stage for them to understand. You guys have the ability here to be heroes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You know?
You should really hit them with that. Because I'm going to be saying you have the opportunity, unless you're very careful, to be goats.
Right, exactly.
If you come out and say, hey, this isn't all a bitter pill.
Right, exactly.
Our cameras were not allowed into the meeting. Over the next 2 hours, JB and Steve advocate on behalf of Kirsten Lobato, arguing in favor of new DNA testing on case evidence, trying to convince Steve Wilson to reconsider the state's case.
It was more confrontational than I expected. Did you hear me finish his sentence one time? He said, and we're not here to, and I said, Stonewall?
Right.
Unfortunately, Steve Wolfson decided not to attend the meeting. Instead, 3 assistant prosecutors sat in on his behalf.
There was absolutely no meeting of the mind outside of a short conversation on football. They hold on to their belief that they are right. We hold on to our knowledge that they're wrong.
Well, for instance, he when I first talked about DNA testing, he went to the statute. This is the legal statute that says we can do what we can't do. And I said, look, this is between us. You know that you have the power to think outside the box and go outside the box, right? He then said, what if Kirsten was to be released in 6 months?
It was almost as if he's trying to make a deal. What if she got out on parole in 6 months?
No, listen to me carefully though. He said, would that stop you from doing what you're doing now? I said, absolutely not.
So we're still going to clear her name.
Yes, it's about justice.
We asked Steve Wolfson to comment on this story. He turned down our request. We got in touch with Thomas Townsend, the lead detective in the case. He also declined to comment. Bill Kephart, the prosecutor in both trials, is now a judge. He did not respond to our phone calls.
Okay, now just push down on it a little bit. Okay, yeah, that's good. You can turn it off. My plan is to fix this truck up and then get another one that's very similar and put a little bit of me into it. And then, of course, when the time comes, let the girls play with the trucks. They'll flip a coin or however it is to see who gets what.
Do you foresee a day that she's going to get out of there and come walking straight into your house?
Absolutely. That day, when I can finally have my family in my house, all having an actual meal together instead of eating out of a vending machine, that's the day I've been waiting for. You know, I just, you know, I try to stay in pretty decent shape and I eat right. And my objective is to stay alive long enough to see her free. If everything goes well, she could be free in as little as 8 years. She's been down for 12. If the truth ever comes out, then she should be set free today. Justice hasn't been served because whoever actually did this crime is still free.
We're probably running out of time, so this is maybe my last question. Is it hard to know that there's an effort going on outside, but you just have to kind of keep to the day-to-day of your existence?
It is hard, and it's also hard to stay emotionally distanced from it all. Because there are things that happen that I get excited about, and I think, okay, well, maybe this is going to be the thing that changes it all. And I have to check myself because I can't live like that. It's too hard. Because then if it doesn't happen, the letdown is excruciating.
Yeah. Well, we wish you the best. Anything you want to say before we go?
Just want to say, Blaze, you did an awesome job, and keep your head up, okay?
Thank you for using IC Solutions. Goodbye.
Unceremoniously.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.